Assault. Sleepers of Reddit, what was your creepiest sleep paralysis experience? I have sleep paralysis a few times a month, or sometimes more if my sleep schedule is out of whack. Since I have it so often, and I've had it since childhood, I've learned to deal with it pretty well. The hallucinations have been different, but I'm usually lucid enough to realize that the scary, aggressive ones are hallucinations. They often get worse the more you struggle, so if you don't manage to break free in the first couple of attempts, just drift back to sleep, as they'll be in your face otherwise. They vary, but they're usually tall, dark figures that will stalk around the bed. Sometimes it's just footsteps. Once, when I'd fallen asleep on a bench, it was a featureless face, sort of like a gray alien, hovering just above my face. It was wheezing. Another time, it was a woman. I'd achieved a state near lucid dreaming while I was paralyzed, and figured I'd summon a hallucination to spend time with. It worked for like 10 seconds. I was spending time with a fae-like woman in a white dress, but lost control, and she turned green and pounced my face with claws, and then disappeared. After she was gone, I thought my flatmate's cat was walking around my bed and by my pillow. I was almost completely awake, now with my eyes open and everything. I was afraid it was gonna start biting my hair, as cats like to do, but my flatmate's voice called for it and it left. When my paralysis faded, and I walked out of my room, I remembered she and the cat had been out of town for a few days. I'm typing this quick at work, so I apologize for any errors. I get to see my sleep paralysis demon at least once a month, usually somewhere near the full moon, which is odd. It starts out usually with me waking up. I can always tell what's about to happen, so I try to scream and wake someone up to shake me out of it. I try to move my limbs and force myself to roll out of bed and wake up. This typically does not work, so I know it's time for a visit. A shadow forms along the floorboards of my bedroom and starts going up the walls. I can then feel the presence of radio or TV static. This shadow starts to form into a demon, similar to the early renditions of Slender Man. He has no eyes or face, just little balls of static where the facial structure should be. He slowly starts edging closer and closer to my face, and the volume of the static rises, and I can feel it very lightly shocking me. It then puts me in some weird trance by grabbing the sides of my face and screaming directly into it. This is the scariest part. The scream is so shrill, I can't even describe to you how terrible it is. As this happens, the room starts to turn red, and these giant arms start to form into long spikes. So while I'm stunned and hypnotized, it starts taunting me with the spikes, running them around my neck and heart, etc. He then reaches up and stabs me directly into the throat, and I wake up. I apologize again for the sloppy typing. I've only had it happen once or twice, but the first time was terrifying. I had woken up for no apparent reason and heard a tapping on my window, which was right over the head of my bed. Instantly, I was overcome by fear. I couldn't move, and I knew it was something evil. I could hear it knocking around outside until it finally started to break through my window. As I looked up, I saw an elongated, pitch-black hand with claw-like fingers. I used every ounce of my willpower to punch at this grotesque appendage, and woke up when my fist hit the wall next to the window. It was incredibly real. My heart was racing, but my window remained unbroken, and there were no other signs that anything had happened. Okay, this is a serious story. Happened in the 10th grade after I got suspended for doing roofies in school and was obviously high in class. My dad had come to pick me up from the principal's office. I went home, drank some water, and knocked the fuck out. Then I had this strange experience where I was asleep but was still alert. I couldn't move or open my eyes. I was laying on my stomach in bed, and I felt the presence of a large monster-type creature in my room. I could vividly hear and feel this thing climb onto my bed and climb onto my back. It was heavy as shit. I wanted to open my eyes and see what the fuck was going on, but I just couldn't. I felt it breathe on the back of my neck. It actually reminded me of the old Disney ride Alien Encounters. I was scared shitless at this point. Then it licked the back of my neck, and all of a sudden I woke up and jumped out of bed screaming. Never experienced it again. Never experienced it before. Was I that high? Probably. A few weeks later, I saw something on the History Channel about it and got scared shitless again. It was a thing, a real thing people had encountered before. Mind you, I'm an atheist. At that point in my life, I wasn't. I have no fucking clue what the hell that shit was all about. Stick to weed, kids. Well, it's only ever happened to me once. My friends and I usually stayed up on this loft where the sound booth was during the sermon because my friend was the sound guy. I decided I would go to his back room and take a nap since I didn't really like church sermons. I was laying down waiting for the sleep to kick in, and I heard the door open. Some little kid came in with his dog. I didn't open my eyes, but I knew he had a dog because I could hear the tag jingling around. I ignored him because I was trying to get to sleep. He just tugged his dog along until he got to about the middle of the room. Then he just rushed next to me. Not like he ran, he just appeared there. He had a giant head and these deep black eyes. He still looked like a kid, but giant and old at the same time. Weird thing was, I could see all of this with my eyes closed. I was terrified to the point of screaming, but he held me down. He was pushing me down somehow. Not with his hands, but like his face just squeezed my arms in and held my chest down. My legs didn't move out of fear. It's hard to explain, but I felt oppressed rather than forced into immobility. His face kept getting closer, and as it did, the pushing got harder, like trying to get two magnets to touch the same pole. There was sound too. He made this noise like a furnace, the way a giant fire sounds when it gets big enough. Roars rather than pops and cracks. His voice was just like that, saying something I couldn't understand in a voice that was deafeningly loud with the sound of fire. Then suddenly, it was all over. I woke up and had to stop myself from screaming. I sat up and looked around, scared that something might still be there. I realized I must have been sleeping way harder than I thought I had, because I obviously had a nightmare. I went out into the sound booth again, and my friends told me I had only been in the back room for about 15 minutes. That made sense, since the entire event felt like it happened in about 10 seconds. I must have fallen into a deeper sleep than I thought, had this night terror, then woke up all at once. I knew about sleep paralysis and night terrors since my mom gets them, so I figured I was fine. I never have a lot of nightmares, and they usually aren't that bad. But having that happen and knowing that night terrors are hereditary lets me know that I might have them more in the future. I don't look forward to that. The worst for me was when I got it the very first time. I had no idea what was happening. In the far corner of my room was this intense darkness. If this makes sense, the room was dimly lit by a computer fan, a clock on my cable box, and a few other little indicator lights on my desk. That corner was the blackest black I've ever seen. It was almost like it was sucking me in, and then it got closer and closer until it was at my bed. And then I felt something walk from the bottom of my bed to my chest, and then suddenly I was unable to breathe at all. And then, after intense struggling, it shot back into the corner and disappeared. And I woke up. I slept with the light on for like a week. I was 18 years old at the time. I had some pretty bad sleep paralysis a few years back. First, it was the usual waking up to a demon/zombie man breathing at my face, and other weird hallucinations. But the worst incident was this one time that fucked me up for a day. I woke up and got to doing my morning routine. When I was brushing my teeth, I started to hear weird whispers and voices. I got this strong feeling that something is very, very wrong, like something wanted to hurt me more than anything. I turn around, and it's the fucking ring girl standing there screaming. Suddenly, I was back in bed. Alright, well, I fucked up. It was a dream. Super real, but what the hell? I get up again, and soon the whispers begin again. And this time, the ring girl surprises me in the hallway. I wake back up in bed again, terrified. This happens like 3 times in a row. The last time, I wake up and my friend is sitting on my couch playing Xbox. I start to tell him about my fucked up, super real dreams, until I notice his mouth is hanging unnaturally wide open, like he's breaking his own jaw. His head turns slowly around 360 degrees. And I wake up in bed. This time, it was for real. But I walked around my apartment like a fucking war victim, jumping at every sound. I was shaken the entire day. You've stayed a while and listened. Here's a side quest. Head over to the comments and tell me what your favorite story has been so far in this video. Complete the side quest and be on the lookout for a personal thank you from me in a future video. Thank you for listening, and please continue to enjoy these stories. It's happened to me a few times, but only one really freaks me out still. I woke up, or so I thought, in the late night lying on my back. I felt that weird pressure on my body and knew right then that it was happening. I finally was able to open my eyes, and when I did, there was this woman/girl sitting in the chair 2 feet from my bed in a long white dress. I couldn't see her face, but I knew she was there just staring at me. Never moved or said anything, but I was absolutely shitting myself. When I finally came to, I was sweating and didn't go back to sleep again that night. The weird part is that it didn't seem abnormal to me, as if the woman is there every night, and I subconsciously see her, but never really remember. Fuck. Wow. Well, let me start by saying, I have had sleep paralysis for about 15 years now. I would usually be affected by it 2 or 3 times a week, at the very least. After several years, it became far more bearable and predictable. When I sleep on my back, almost exclusively, and when I would take naps or snooze on my alarm clock, which is almost daily. So 3 years ago, I slept at my girlfriend's parents' house. I slept in her sister's room. There was a pull-out couch. The 2 rooms, my girlfriend's sister and my girlfriend's, were adjoined by a typical ensuite bathroom. It was a long day, and I pulled out the bed and began to fall asleep while my girlfriend slept in her room. As I began to drift off, I got the familiar feeling before I became consumed by a bout. I felt a weight on the back of my chest, pulling my back down, and an overall tingy sensation accompanied by an almost acidic, numbing feeling filling my mouth and throat. This time, however, I was on my side. This was very rare to have gone into sleep paralysis on my side. There was a pillow from the couch that lay next to me. As I felt it coming on stronger and stronger, I began to look closer and closer at the pillow and noticed it started to look like a slimy, curled up old woman in the fetal position. She began to unravel from her position and her mouth opened. Her teeth were touching via streams of dark spit. Her head tilted slightly and she began to moan as she came closer to my face. I could feel the warmth of her breath and even smell it. It was putrid. I began my system of waking myself up, which usually meant trying to raise my arm and yell myself awake. Being on my side, this didn't work. I began to panic as she was within centimeters from my face. She began screaming audibly. At this point, I was so overcome with fear that I think the explosion of my heart rate woke me. Now, let me tell you that this was the most terrifying bout I've ever had. A close second was my first experience, at least until about an hour later. I woke up sweating, absolutely terrified. I was sure that something was wrong with the room. I'm not religious, but there was just bad juju in the room. So I walked through the adjoining bathroom to my girlfriend. I was almost in tears. I told her I had a really bad bout and just needed to sleep next to her so she could wake me if I acted out in my sleep. She shortly falls asleep afterwards. I lay in the bed, my eyes getting heavy as lead. I was on my back. My eyes never closed, but I felt the acidity in my throat and the weight on my back. I was laser focused on the doorway that linked the bathroom and the other room I had just left. I saw a shadow come through the door on the ground, crawling. I could feel the vibration of the floor and the bed as it slinked to the bottom of the footboard. It crawled up over the top of it, and I recognized the old woman and her slimy, deteriorated face. She had a horrible smile. I again began my waking sequence, trying to scream, balling my fists. I was on my back this time, so I thought it would work. It didn't. I felt her cold hands on my legs, wrapping around my ankles and dragging up my legs. It felt wet, cold, and sharp. I was absolutely racked with fear. My breath ceased as she boosted herself up to a standing position and then began screaming again. It grabbed my legs, jumped back off the bed onto the carpeted floor, shaking the entire room, and ripped me down off the bed and dragged me on my back through the bathroom and back to the room in a matter of 2 seconds. I burst awake, sitting up sweating. My heart was racing. I was 25 years old, and I woke up my girlfriend weeping. I was terrified to go back to sleep. I had experienced sleep paralysis literally hundreds of times, but never had I experienced anything like those 2 bouts. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. Footnote: since that night, 5 years later, I've had sleep paralysis maybe 2 times. It was the end of it, but it wanted to go out with a bang. TLDR, saw a demon woman lying next to me. I woke and moved to another room. She found her way into the room and physically dragged me back. One of the last sleep paralysis experiences for someone who experienced it hundreds of times. Thank you for listening. Want to listen to Reddit read by an actual person? Look no further. That's right. I will never utilize an AI voice to tell these stories. That's a promise. Please support this channel by hitting like and subscribing. Yours truly, Verrückte Sult.